Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our conversation with Savi Horne of the Land Loss Prevention Project. We're very happy to have Savi with us today, doing very interesting and important work. I'm Dan Fiorino. I'm director of the Center for Environmental Policy at American University. And this program is part of the William K. Riley program on environmental leadership. So we have a definite environmental leader with us today. So welcome, Savi. Savi Horne is the executive director of the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers Land Loss Prevention Project. This was created to provide legal expertise, community education, and advocacy skills to help farmers and rural landowners facing legal, economic, and environmental challenges. So her work gets into sort of the economics of farming and the environmental aspects and justice and a number of other issues. Savi received her undergraduate degree in urban legal systems from City College, City University of New York, and her law degree from Rutgers University. So welcome, Savi. Nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Dan and Danielle from the Center for Environmental Policy at AU, and I thank the students attending and the audience. So I really look forward to our conversation, and I think we're ready to roll.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay.
Could you tell us a little bit about just the history of Black farmers and landowners in North Carolina and throughout the United States, and why it's important to have organizations like the Land Loss Prevention Project?
Well, the Land Loss Prevention Project got its start 40 years ago, and almost 40 years ago. In '83, and that was in the midst of the 1980 Small Farm Conference, crisis in the country, where the farmers in the Midwest and the Southeast, countrywide, were experiencing economic downturn due to trade and being burdened by a huge debt owed to the Farm Services Agency. And it was disproportionately impacting African-American and people of color farmers in Eastern North Carolina. And so the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers got together and pulled together a task force of lawyers and social scientists to look at the root cause and what were the tools necessary. And coming out of that study, they felt that most readily available was to use their skill set as lawyers to fashion remedies to assist farmers in Eastern North Carolina. And that was really the genesis of the program, but it was also in alignment with movements in the Black world around liberation for land and being unyoked from colonial infrastructure and structures. And so it came from, I think, from an internationalist perspective on what was going on with farmers in the South and in the Southern United States.
Okay, and it has the history of land issues changed over the years that you've been working on this project?
Yes, I do believe so. Wow. I must say that we as Black farmers and those in the movement, when we go back to the, that number that still is in our mind, that we hold on to, the 16 million, 15 million, 16 million acres of land by 1910, considering that it was 50 years after the end of slavery. African-American families returned to agriculture in such numbers, 975,000, almost a million. Small farmers and tenant farmers and sharecroppers on the land producing throughout the South, feeding their community, and a very small few engaging in more commercial enterprise in agriculture. And they build communities and infrastructure for families to thrive. And when you look at the Great Depression that happened, and half the numbers of our farmers were decimated, but to think that during the classic civil rights period from 1954 to 1969, when we saw the numbers of farmers dip to 6 million, and throughout that period, for example, and I don't have it in, I'm just rounding up, in North Carolina in 54, you had over 1 million acres of land. And by 1969, that was about 500,000.
Wow.
And today you have a bit over 200,000 acres. So that's what we're talking about. The way in which systems reacted to the freedom struggles of African Americans, be it for voting rights, accommodation, the whiplash of getting at Black-owned land with concerted effort by the USDA and locals within the white community to destabilize and grab away Black-owned land. So that's where that struggle, that historic struggle is grounded.
Yeah. So your work both builds on the civil rights movement and the environmental movement in many ways, and of course the origins of the modern environmental justice movement go back to North Carolina and the Warren County issues. So you're involved in economic justice and environmental justice. How do those two themes work together?
Well, I see them as coming together in very unique ways and very predictably because of how society is structured. And so for us, the environmental justice movement highlights access to land and the full use of land and the ability to develop and retain land. We believe in this way, the environmental justice movement serves as a container for many issues: economic development, land retention, political participation, access to health, and infrastructure. So it comes across as a place where the African American community and the needs of the community comes together, and we do not see a separation as such. And in fact, the founders of the project felt that our practice would have been at the nexus of environmental justice and land loss. Yeah. Because EJ is the container. Okay. It involves the land, the economics, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and your focus is on the land, but that leads to a lot of economic and environmental issues. And you have a particular perspective on some of those. So our audience is generally very interested in environmental issues. So could you talk about work you do related to sustainable agriculture and how you work with farming community to promote environmental sustainability while you're also trying to promote economic fairness and justice?
Well, the land loss prevention project had the fortune, and I really call it a fortune, of an investment by the Kellogg Foundation in the 1990s, which seeded, if you will, the sustainable agriculture environment here, because it provided a table where land grant institutions, NGO, farmers, CBOs could come together and look at environmental practices and put them into place that would change the landscape and how we grow food. And out of that, a center was developed, which is very unique in the South because it's a partnership between Land Grant Institution of North Carolina A&T and North Carolina State and the Department of Consumer Affairs into what is now known as and continue to thrive as a Center for Environmental Systems. And there's a farm that is devoted to sustainable agriculture, organic production. It's a learning farm where the techniques are learned. But I just want to uplift the fact that coming out of that experience, when land loss reorganized, so we now have a litigation unit that works to stabilize farm enterprise through using legal structures. We also develop a sustainable development and the environment unit. And with that, we shape or help to shape in a collaborative manner sustainable agricultural policies and practices. And we work with coalition partners in DC area in shaping federal policy to support sustainable agriculture. So it really is a case where we do serve the cause of sustainable agriculture locally, regionally, and in the national arena.
Yeah, do groups from other parts of the country visit the farm and use that? I mean, it sounds like it's meant to be a way to demonstrate a lot of sustainable and regenerative ag.
Yes, it does pull in people from all parts of the country in the South, particularly. You have also a very strong sustainable agriculture program through the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. We have a Southern SARE, and that works with land grants and farmers to institute sustainable agriculture projects. And it does create a very dynamic, the Southern SARE program, learning community and practice and teaching for not only farmers, but also for extensionists at the land grant institution.
And I know you do work also on food justice. And I ran across a statement you have made that food justice requires land justice. So could you tell us what is food justice in your conception? And then what are the connections with the kind of work that you do?
Well, for us, food justice is about how we feed communities. And it really is centered in regenerative agriculture, as we now call it, and in the African-American tradition, the African-American agrarian, agroecological culture. So for us, food justice simply is the ability for African-American families and communities to feed itself in a way that is nourishing to their bodies and move them away from the more corporatized industrial food system that we believe has borne out during this COVID epidemic, why so many of our people succumb because of dietary issues that have been historic in nature. So for us, food justice is the regrounding of agriculture within a local, sustainable community that produces culturally appropriate food that is nourishing to our communities. And that is at the fulcrum of that being local control. Now, the land justice part dovetails with that because you do need land. And because of the land loss issues within African-American communities, what we do want is ways in which we can hold land and redevelop our common ownership of land. We're now calling the Black Land Commons, that farmers, new generation farmers, urban farmers will have access to land that they can then tend in a way to make the soil be enriched using natural processes, agroecological processes. So it's about working together, the food and land justice piece. And it also is about the return of African-American land that has been lost due to discrimination. So it really speaks volumes to that, but it also situates the struggle of food justice and land justice within movements of people of color in the South.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, food justice and land justice indeed are closely related. So Savi, you mentioned African-American agrarian culture.
Mhm.
Sounds like a lot of what we think of as sustainable agriculture actually is part of that culture and part of that tradition. So could you talk a bit more about that? That's a really interesting connection.
Yes, and I really thank you for that question, Dan, because it gives me the opportunity to think and talk about one of the hero of our time and the unrecognized father of sustainable agriculture, situated at Tuskegee University, George Washington Carver and George Washington Watley. Carver, particularly during that time at Tuskegee, helped people in Alabama, Black poor families, to use what they had available on their land and to integrate using diverse farm techniques of reusing manure and replenishing the soil, not buying any kind of chemicals, but replenishing the land with natural resources that are available, and feeding your local community and making the family unit self-contained in terms of food. And so so for us, he started the sustainable agriculture movement, and it grew out of Tuskegee, and Tuskegee University continues that tradition to this day, as well as being a thought leader in the land tenure needs of African-American communities on the land rights front.
Okay, that's great to have a little bit of that history. So, what we think of as maybe something new is actually something that has a long history.
Yes,
a very
a deep
substantial
history. A deep history, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying that is necessarily unique to African Americans, but it is unique in the sense that an institution provided the first set of extension tools to a historic African American population, and to keep people from starvation and providing them with healthy and nutritious food within their local communities. I think, to me, that's the difference. A local food system emerged around Tuskegee and beyond, from family to family, of feeding their communities and then building infrastructure and institutions of higher education and education in school.
Yeah, excellent. I'm just curious, generationally, are young people going into farming for the kind of communities and organizations you work with, or is it sort of an older generation that's doing it? How's that all going?
The demographics in terms of the generation of farmers, you do have, the average age of Black farmers and in terms of up in their 60s, but the new generation came into farming through the urban agriculture movements in cities and in small towns. They are young people, they are organized, they're creative, they're making innovative use of land spaces, as well as spaces for value added production. They are coming together using their finances in a very collective manner. You have Soul Fire Farm in Grafton, New York. You have Earthseed in North Carolina. You have Black Dirt Collective in the eastern shores of Maryland and throughout the United States, as far as Oakland, Washington State, of young Black people coming together, learning agriculture, and engaging in practices to provide healthy foods in their local communities and thriving at it and growing a movement. And so the challenge has been, how do we provide the container for that? And there are a number of such organizations that have emerged to meet the needs. You have the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, Black Land and Power Coalition, which is based in the Southeast, but with membership in the Midwest as well. You have the Southern African American Farmers Organic Network that provides technical assistance throughout the Southeast for African American farmers in their local communities. I could probably go on and on. You have in New York State, Corbin Hills Farm, which has just developed under a practice to feed, bring in healthy food into New York City. They were able to provide the infrastructure where they're now bringing on board 6 farm families onto land that is permanent in upstate New York, where they can begin their own farm community, producing food for their downstate peeps, if you will, communities.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a real sort of community collective
I
conscience
think so.
behind a lot of this, and that's, you know, that's often what's missing in this country.
Right. And you've seen it
Yeah.
right here, right where you all are in DC.
Yeah.
The urban agriculture scene is very robust. And it's those same group of young urban farmers that have been doing amazing things, and they have organized around and attend conferences together. One of the leading conveners of that is Black Urban Growers, and it's known as BUGS. And you see young people from DC at BUGS meetings, and it's amazing. It's just a very beautiful energy of belonging and knowing that you could really put, you know, we call it action in commons is praxis, so you can actually put action in place and see it moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's exciting. And yeah, urban agriculture and sort of bringing healthier food to urban communities, and so there's some of the community aspects of working together on that. That's a very interesting phenomenon. So that's happening as well then.
Yes, absolutely happening. And I think it's throughout the United States where you have people of color communities, you're having the rise of urban and sustainable agricultural systems in very small units, feeding communities.
Okay, and I should just mention that we'll be taking questions from the audience. So just remind you that you can submit questions through the Q&A function, and we'll get to those with Savi in a little while. So Savi, the Land Loss Prevention Project, you do litigation.
Yes.
You do sort of, you have your model farm, a lot of activities related to sustainable agriculture, education and awareness. What do you find are some of the most effective ways that you can try and achieve your goals? I'm sure litigation sometimes is part of it. So how do you use tools?
I should hope that is, yes, sometimes it's part of it,
Yeah.
but it's not the only thing. It's not the only way to get at solutions.
Yeah.
And so we recognized earlier on in terms of the needs that were in the farming community, we developed a business infrastructure within the litigation unit because they're using legal skill sets. And it is called the Small Growth Business Center for Farmers. And it is an internal resource to the organization that provides counseling to farmers who need business planning services in order to sustain their operation. They benefit from our knowledge of dealing with business entity formation, contract review, counseling regarding availability of federal programs and ways in which to overcome barriers to some of these programs.
Okay.
So we see that as moving forward, bringing the farmer to a place before you get to a problem. Because by the time you come with a problem, sometimes it's a little too late. We try our best, but let's be upfront and provide services that we know that they need that will help them to be viable and sustainable. So
yeah, and I would guess
the
financing is sort of helping people get access to financing.
absolutely
Important
we do that.
strategy as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about, so we're all worried about climate change these days. And we know that's going to affect agriculture areas that depend on land and depend on water are going to be a lot of issues. Is that, to what extent does climate change enter into your work, and what are some thoughts about the impact that could have in the next couple of decades?
Well, I've been doing a lot of thinking about climate change of late. It's not just the conversation that's happening in DC with President Biden around the climate crisis that faces this nation and countries worldwide. But we see it, climate change playing out in coastal North Carolina. We see where coastal communities are drifting more westward, as it's predicted that within 50 years, the coastline that we now know in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and the cultures, Gullah Geechee cultures, that with the shifting of the coast due to climate change, it will uproot and in many regard, I wouldn't say it would near collapse of certain folkways and cultural aspect to living along the coast. But the coast has become a high amenities community. And as a result, what I fear the most is that because of climate change, that those high amenities community will be shifting more westward, and that we might see a speed up of relocation into the coastal plains further into eastern North Carolina, and which have some beautiful river ecosystems. And I think it's about people just wanting waterfront, oceanfront.
Yeah.
And wanting mountains and living within those systems, and they're fragile. So the question now is, can those fragile systems bear up to a population shift inward, westward? And I think that is the challenge that North Carolina will face, because it's a very beautiful place. You know, you have the mountains, you have the Piedmont, you have the central coastal plain. It's just a very varied ecosystem, and it does give people with resources, with money, the ability to shift. And it might cause major displacement of traditional communities within those coastal plains as the value of land escalates.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I see the concern that sort of a lot of development, particular kinds of development could be moving westward and could affect, well, land values and affect sensitive ecosystems and those kinds of issues.
Yes, but it's not only just climate that's doing this. We
Yeah,
saw this
right.
during COVID. So like, I think we have now a pandemic scenario in which people from the metropoles are moving south. And that's also impacting places, small towns, and because they have the ability to buy property well above market value. So you're seeing those phenomena. So you're seeing enclosure of land by the wealthy. And so I do believe that you're going to have issues of a major proportion dealing with land tenure, land rights, and the ability for multiple generations of people to age in place and not be displaced by folk from the Midwest and California who are seeking relief from either pandemic or climate related issues.
Yeah, so yeah, there's the pandemic and then there's climate change. A lot of these factors coming together. But I have heard about people are learning they don't necessarily have to live in urban areas to work in urban jobs.
Right.
And so that there's a lot of movement to areas like yours. So if people want to support the kind of goals that the Land Loss Prevention Project and you are committed to, what kind of things could they do? I mean, is it a matter of what kind of food you eat, or what organizations you support? Do you have some advice for people that would like to support this kind of work?
I think wherever you are, there are movements towards sustainable lifestyle and agriculture, and I think people need to get involved. And the larger question of climate justice. How do we, as individuals, live in communities that sustains itself and do no harm to the climate? And I think for us, if people were to reorient their thinking and lifestyle to become more sustainable and to age where they are, and to think about building these fabulous homes that are unnecessary and a drain on the ecosystem and natural resources wherever they go, and to support sustainable agriculture projects, organic agriculture, your local farmers market, and donate resources that you have to organizations that are doing the work, so that they could be more sustained and do more work in the fields that they're working. I think we need to look beyond ourselves and become people that demonstrate that they really care for the land and for others. I think that's a major, I remember Grace Lee Boggs would say, just be simply good human beings. And that if you can change yourself within and see that, then we'll get much further along. Our Mother Jones lived simply so others could simply live. And I think that is the case. And I think we are in a place of the Anthropocene, right? So we're going to deal with climate change, but we must understand that it's not about trying to create a colony in Mars to escape. What we need to do is to deal with the legacy issues that have been plaguing us due to racism and social injustice and environmental justice, and create ways in which we can address them quickly enough and then deal with the major issues of the day, which is how do we contain and protect the earth so we can basically all be on it.
Yeah, I think that that is the the big challenge, and you certainly framed that well. So we're getting some interesting questions from our audience. So one is, how do farmers get connected with your program? If you could explain how you work with farmers on an individual level.
Well, okay, so because we are a legal services organization, we do represent limited resource farmers and BIPOC farmers, and we have a income limitation in keeping with legal services. So it is a certain level above the poverty index. So that's the threshold for our service, and you must be in North Carolina. We network with regional organizations to help people with legal issues and land tenure related issues. We have regional partnership with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which is Southwest Georgia Project, and others throughout the region. And with the emerging organizational skill set of the Black Land and Power Coalition of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, which is seeking to develop a financial commons that will help farmers to purchase land and to develop their self-determined local economic enterprise within communities. So to assist landlords, the best way is to work within your state and support sustainable agriculture and land tenure reform, like your state adopting the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Statute. If you were to go to the Uniform Law Commission, there's an out kit that you can work with your local legislatures on adopting this. It is not a Black problem necessarily. It is a problem of low income people, but disproportionately African American, because of the historical tension that we have held, in which our land was taken through legal processes. The distrust of that has been cemented within our culture, and we are working at ways to contain Black-owned land in community land trusts. So to help us all is to get really good federal policy and local policy in place, and to develop a more robust donor community that will sustain organizations that are doing the work.
Okay, that's excellent ideas. And actually a question related to some things going on now. So I'll read the comment from my colleague, Garrett Grady Lovelace. There have been
Oh,
yes.
hello.
She
I
sends a whole lot of
recognize her as a distant cousin because there's some Lovelace in my family.
Very good. There have been some recent victories on the Hill regarding Justice for Black Farmers Act on land tenure, emergency debt relief for Black farmers, heirs property, and some other things. Moving forward, do you see momentum for Black farmers in making a livelihood from sustainable agriculture through payments for ecosystem services and perhaps through updates of parity and pricing floors? So are some of those trends perhaps promising?
Yes, I do see that happening. I think within the Black Farmers for Justice Act and the emergency relief for BIPOC farmers, there are those programs in there that moves us towards sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture, but also looking at the ways in which traditionally the US farming system has disadvantaged low income and socially disadvantaged farmers. I think that's gonna be blown wide open. We now have former members of the Trump administration, Stephen Miller and Mark Meadows, who I think within the last 72 or 36 hours filed action in Texas challenging the BIPOC as violative of Title VI of the 1964 Act because they claim it discriminates. The term socially disadvantaged, which is race-based, discriminate against people, European descended people. So there's that struggle that that's underfoot, but I do believe because this was a congressional act, I think that should provide some measure of legal support in the long run that the act stands, but you never know.
Yeah, well, I had not heard of that development.
Yes, it's very, very recent. It was being reported out in Farm Press yesterday, and I'm not sure. I think the Washington Post may have picked it up today.
Okay, well, we can all look for that. We have a question from Gad Siegfried, who's a student of ours and works with the Center for Environmental Policy. And it's on pesticides use, which of course are an issue in sustainable agriculture. Regarding the use of pesticides generally, but specifically in post-colonial regions like the French Caribbean, for instance, which has been poisoned by ketone use in the 70s and 80s. How do movements against pesticides gain traction? And how can those who have been affected by pesticide poisoning receive justice? And asking also about perhaps financial reparations or legal pathways for getting relief from people who have been harmed by pesticides. So is that something that your organization gets involved in?
Well, we work across in coalitions, and the Rural Coalition is a wide tent umbrella for actions dealing with farm worker justice work. And so we have been engaged in the work dealing with pesticide through being a member of the Rural Coalition, but also the work of being part of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and the fact that one of our board member, Vernice Travis Miller, is a leading thought person on the environment, and within that issues of pesticides is part of her focus and work nationally.
Okay, very good. So there were a few things that I wanted to follow up on, Savi. So how does the future look for Black farmers in particular, but for small farmers? Are they going to be able to compete economically? What is financing available for the kind of work they do? Is there support for regenerative agriculture and those kinds of activities? What does the future look like for small farmers?
Well, it depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to be a small farmer taking on commodity agriculture, that's going to be a problem. If you're going to be a small farmer engaging in more intensive animal production, that'll be a problem because of how that system is skewed economically, not in favor of the contract person who's growing the food. I do believe that small farmers who engage in their local food system work will thrive. I do believe that provision within the growth of the local ag and promotion program of the USDA, which will undergird the resources needed to move or scale local agriculture. I believe that could be networked into regional agriculture, I think the whole system of agriculture will change and will benefit small producers. I do believe, like, if you're upstate New York or in the Midwest and you're involved in dairy production, that will continue to be a struggle. If you're a small-time fisher folk in Maine, given the consolidation within fisheries that benefits these large conglomerates, that will be a problem. But you're seeing more and more within my local community. There are fisher folk who supply fish protein to the local markets, and that's what you buy. So I think consumers are more savvy and they're looking to support local. And so I do see small farmers thriving. However, if you do not have land already, that'll be a problem.
Right, right. Yeah, land is still pretty important for producing crops of various kinds. So it's a matter of really sort of knowing your market and knowing where you can fit and having a distinctive contribution. When you mention commodity crops, so you're talking about the sort of big high volume corn and wheat and things like that, I assume. What you mentioned a couple of other possibilities, but are there particular crops that at least you find a lot of the farmers you're working with are doing well economically?
Well, I do believe your horticulture farmer who is growing, culturally appropriate greens for their community, vegetables, legumes, that they're thriving. I have seen where even farmers who have ventured out into local production of wool that is not subject to chemicals or cotton, they are thriving. I do see markets for people, farmers who want to engage in sustainable practices for whatever commodity that they're in. There is a market. I think coming out of this COVID crisis, people will leave this space acutely aware of the benefits of healthy eating and healthy lifestyle. But the rub is we have to make it so that is for everyone and it's not money driven.
Okay, yeah, and that because I know sort of local organic, there's always a matter of competing economically with the alternatives. I'm curious, very interested in clean energy, and of course, wind energy is expanding in the United States. Some offshore, but a lot still onshore. Do the farmers you work with, is that something, leasing their land for wind facilities, is that something they're doing or something that has potential to maybe help economically?
Well, we've had, even at our land loss, a few cases coming to our law firm dealing with wind energy and leasing and solar. And the advice is that you have to be very, very careful with those contracts. I have seen where, and credit to the Natural Resource Conservation Services, in their partnership, have partnered with the Oklahoma Black Historical Society, which is a African-American historic farm organization, and people of color as well, to experiment using solar energy to power wells and other activities on the farm, making it a very local, off the grid production that then will lower the price of energy on the farm. Because we gotta, we do know that agriculture has a large energy consumption footprint.
Yeah.
And the more we can localize it at the production level on the farm, I think the better off we will be. But I'm not really sure. Yes, I am supportive of any energy system that reduces our fossil fuel dependency. But I think everything has some negative environmental consequences that needs to be studied, but clearly, renewable energy is the way forward.
Yeah, definitely. But I like your point. I was thinking of sort of leasing land for bigger companies to generate wind power, but it also is an option for
Mhm.
generating energy at a very distributed local level.
Right.
And it's clean energy, and it may be more affordable, and it's something that you have a great deal of control over. So those are all, I think, really important points. Are there organizations in other states other than North Carolina that are doing work similar to the land loss prevention project?
Absolutely, they are. And we are all well networked throughout the
Yeah.
region. And I would just, it really gives me great pleasure to just uplift some of those. So in North Carolina, we collaborate with Rural Advancement Foundation International, RAFI, and its Farmers of Color Network. We have our very local Operation Spring Plan. And as I mentioned, Center for Environmental Farming System and our land grants. We also have foreclosure prevention with Legal Aid of North Carolina and those partnership, because that is one way in which African-American low-income people lose land and homes. Our regional collaboration is with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, the Southwest Georgia Project, the Southeast African-American Farmers Network, SAFON, and as I mentioned before, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and the Black Land and Power Coalition. They are a lot of groups that are out there actually doing the work. They're not hidden. And you attend local food conferences, you meet them, but they are visible in communities and working with local farmers.
Those are a number of excellent organizations. So it's a very rich network.
Oh yes, it's very
with very
rich.
similar goals.
And then on the policy level, having a tent, such as the Rural Coalition and the National Family Farm Coalition and the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, to bring together groups to influence policy. So I think there are many levers that we all have to influence policy and local farming practices on the ground within our communities.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So just two more things I thought we could get to in our few minutes left. Of course, we've had a change in presidential administrations. We have new leadership at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Do you see, or is it too soon to tell, but do you see sort of promising trends that that there'll be a number of opportunities to work with USDA on the issues that you're involved in?
Yes, I actually do. I have a lot of hope, and I wasn't feeling very hopeful. I believe, like many, we had our doubts about a redo by Secretary Vilsack, but he really came out in a very committed way about the agency and transforming the agency and putting real legs to make that happen. He's hired people who know what they're doing, and people of integrity in FSA, in heading up equity work, heading up the Office of General Counsel, in his own internal office, the deputy coming out of a land grant institution and has earned her chops locally as a state commissioner of ag in Virginia. I think I see a lot of hope, but again, we need very strong federal policy and commitment on the part of Congress to see us all through this course. And I think we will see a difference within our communities. Clearly, the emergency relief for BIPOC farmers must stand. It is not about reparations. As Secretary Vilsack says, it's about leveling the playing field and being fair to all farmers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's an
And
excellent.
actually his word, to just quote him, is rebalancing. And I think that's a key word.
Okay, I like that, rebalancing. So just, finally, just if you were gonna just name what you thought were the big successes of the land loss prevention project, things that you're most proud of, what kind of things come to mind?
I am very proud of the fact that we are in our 38th year. I'm very proud of the fact that we have been able to stay the course even after we lost state funding. I'm very proud of our funding community of funders, local and national funders who have stayed the course with us in the expansion of our program. I am proud of the thousands of cases we have managed to the benefit of our farm and local community, and the work that we have done in the ag policy arena to make it a better place for small farmers and limited resource and socially disadvantaged farmers and farm workers to thrive within a sustainable system that has economic, social, and environmental justice as its leg of not just a theoretical construct, but being able to actionize those principles in the practice and in the local community.
Well, that's an excellent list of accomplishments and things to be proud of. So this has been a genuine pleasure to talk with you today, Savi. You brought a rural, agricultural, a number of other perspectives to our audience, and we appreciate your sharing that with us. Did you want to say something about these books?
Yes, absolutely. These books have done really cutting edge analysis of where the future of agriculture. Nia Penniman with Soul Fire Farm and this manual around how to help Black farmers, young Black farmers. It is geared towards young Black farmers enter in agriculture and maintain not just the techniques of sustainable agriculture, but how to navigate the USDA system and to build local food economy. Freedom Farmers by Dr. Monica White is a must read. It delves into the history of African-American cooperative development and how that has played out in terms of our economic and political rights. It is a dynamic book, and looking at DC and its local food system is Dr. Ashanti Reese, her book on Black food geographies around DC and the rise of local Black productive sector based on young farmers within DC as they deal with food apartheid structures, dismantling it within local African-American communities of DC. I highly recommend these 3 books.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well,
Sure.
yeah, you're doing great work on environmental justice and environmental sustainability and enhancing equity and overcoming some historical patterns. So thank you very much, Savi Horne of the Land Loss Prevention Project. It was great talking with you today.
Likewise, Dan, and I do look forward to sitting down and having a coffee with you.
Absolutely.
And talking
We'll do
some more.
that.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
and thank you,
you.
Danielle, and your team. It's been my pleasure, and I will cherish this experience.
Oh, thank you very much. So we have a couple of other events coming up I just want to mention. Both on May 13th, a Technology Opportunities Symposium is part of a project we're doing looking at the role of technology in promoting environmental justice. So we're looking at some different technologies and some different opportunities. And then also the final in our 5-part series on decarbonizing the global economy, updating old actors and introducing the race to carbon neutrality. So they both will be on May 13th. So with that.
Thank you, and I'll be in the audience. Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye, Savi. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to the School of Public Affairs staff and to Danielle Miller-Wagner, and especially to Savi Horne. And we hope to see you at future events. And everybody have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Yes. Okay. Bye. Stay well, everyone. Bye-bye.